So for today's notes, we're going to be on page 221 in our notebook, and we're going to be working on something called the percent equation. So let's just fill in this definition. The percent equation is a quick way to find a part of a whole quantity by multiplying the whole by the percent written as a decimal. So let's kind of review what that means. So you were doing equations, and we're going to go over here on the left and write this down. We had this equation, part over whole, this percent proportion, equals percent over 100. Well, this is really just the percent as a decimal. That's what you're doing when you write that. And if I wanted to get the part all by itself, if I multiplied both sides by the whole, what I would end up doing is getting whole over whole, which would cancel out to be 1, and I would end up with part equals percent as a decimal times the whole. And that's what this equation is. So when I come over here to fill it in, the part equals the whole multiplied by the percent written as a decimal. Very important. So they tell us to convert a percent to a decimal, divide the percent by 100, or move the decimal to the left 2 places. You have those 2 options. So before we get started, I just want to write the examples of what the problems look like. So if you look at number 1, this is a typical way they write this problem. Find some percent of some number. That's one way to write it. Another way to write it, if you look at number 3, is what is blank percent of blank number. And then another way you might see it, and maybe not here but other places, is they might say what percent of some number is or equal. And just so you're aware, the word is the same thing as an equal sign. You can read it as is. So let's go through and work on these problems together. So they want us to find 12% of 90. So my equation, my part, equals, and I'm going to write x equals because that's what I'm trying to find, my whole, which is 90, times the percent as a decimal. And that's going to be 0.12, because I can either divide 12 by 100 or move the decimal places to the left, and that's what I'm multiplying. So I end up with 10.8 as my answer for this one. Number 2, find 96% of 175. So I'm finding the percent, 0.96, that's 96% written as a decimal, times 175, and that equals 168. So what is 27% of 28? So x equals 0.27 times 28, and that's 7.56. Number 4, what is 48.5% of 300? So my percent is going to be 0.485, because remember I'm moving that 2 spaces, and it's going to be times 300 as the whole. So my answer is going to be 145.5. Next one, find 2% of 138. The tricky thing about this is 2%, so x equals 2%, you might be tempted to put 0.2, but that's not correct. You're moving the decimal place 2 spaces, so it is going to be 0.02 times 138. So be very careful with single-digit percents because you actually have a 0 in front of them after the decimal point. So 0.02 times 138 is 2.76. Number 6, what is 81.25% of 248? So x is equal to, I'm going to rewrite that percent as a decimal, so it's going to be 0.8125 times 248. And I get 201.5 for that one. So now we get some word problems. Kate spent 23% of her last paycheck on groceries. If she made $908, how much did she spend on groceries? So this was how much she made. That's the whole amount of her paycheck. She spent $23 on groceries. So they want to know what part of that paycheck is 23%. So x equals 0.23 for the percent, 908 for the whole or the total, and you end up with 208.84. So that is how much she spent on groceries. There's a label for this one since it's a word problem. Mark has only used 8.5% of a 34-ounce bottle of shampoo. How many ounces has he used? So he's used 8.5%, so I want to figure out how much ounces that is. So X equals, this is another one of those single-digit percent, so 0.085. There's going to be a 0 because you're moving it 2 places. You've got to get a 0 in front of that 8. And it's a 34-ounce total. That's how much was in the bottle. That's the whole. So the answer is 2.89. 2.89 ounces is 8.5% of the bottle. That's how much he used. Number 9, there were 80 golfers in the first round of a tournament. Of the 80, 62.5% qualified for the next round. How many did not qualify? This question's tricky because we've got to figure out, we know that this many qualified. So we have to figure out how many didn't qualify after we figure out the number for 62.5%. So 80 golfers, 0.625, 62.5% of those 80 golfers qualified. So that's what you're going to do to figure out how much that is. How much is 62.5% of 80? When I do that math, I get 50. That means 50 qualified. Well, guess what? I'm trying to figure out how many did not qualify. So if I had 80 total golfers, 50 qualified, that means 30 golfers did not qualify. So be careful with some of these questions because you may work to get an answer, but it turns out you had to do one more thing to get what they really wanted to know. Okay, number 10. Tom is a lawyer who makes $132,000 per year. If his legal assistant, Alec, makes 53% of his salary, find Alec's salary. So we need to find what is 53% of Tom's salary. So we're going to take that percent and turn it to a decimal, 0.53, multiply by 132,000, and you get 69,960, and that is dollars, and that is Alec's salary because it is 53% of Tom's. So that is another way to look at percent proportions, and we call this the percent equation.